Hello, everyone. Good to be here. Thanks for showing up. Special thanks for Ravi for inviting me not only to speak, but also giving an opportunity to make a proposal for one of the public spaces of Cape Town. One, he said, was in desperate need of some proper landscaping. And then he sent over some pictures, and we could only agree. So it's about Lutuli Plaza, not far from here, in between the Civic Center and the Artscape Theater. And we thought it was a very interesting challenge. We accepted it and started to work on it. And today I'm going to present our idea, our preliminary design. That's where we are in this stage. It's the first time I'm showing it for a big audience. You're the first ones to see it, so I'm thrilled about that. I will introduce it, do a sort of long introduction, let's say, about other works of ours, selected by themes that are relevant also for this project. Yeah, it's a pitch, so if there's any sponsors, donors, other people that like to collaborate, or even like kind civil servants that would help us guide through the bureaucracy of the municipality, please come to me after this talk. But first, a bit about our office. We're based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. This is a photo from last year. We're now with a group of 25 people working on landscapes on different scales. Nature for us is a very important thing, and it's especially coming from the Netherlands because we have so little of it. It's a completely artificial country. What you see here is the result of the agricultural revolution that took place after Second World War, where the total countryside was transformed from a human-scale landscape into a landscape in the scale of machines. And of course, optimizing agricultural production, but getting more and more harsh for people to live in. And I have another example here. There you see it. Those were, let's say, two different moments. This is the same moment, two different places. And on the right side of this Dutch dike, you see this sort of human-scale landscape, and on the left side, the rationalized landscape. And this went so far that we had a professor in school that said that actually he was from South Korea, that the Netherlands was the first modernistic project that on a national scale was fully completed. And by this process, a lot of things were pushed out. So there's very little spontaneous space, very little marginal space, and very little nature. There's no real nature can be found in the Netherlands. And this rigid landscape was also then becoming an inspiration for urbanists to create also very rectilinear and repetitive pieces of city. So we were sort of trapped in this world with a very little escape. So we saw nature as something to create as a sort of escape from this dull reality. This is where we grew up. And we think nature is actually a vital thing for people to have in their daily surroundings as a place for contemplation, and also to give a sense of a bigger territory, and also a place where you might have an unexpected encounter. As landscape architects, we're very optimistic about being able to actually design that nature and those ecosystems. It's not something just to preserve. We have an enormous impact on the ecology all around the globe, of which a lot can be catastrophic, as you can see here. It's beautiful, but problematic. This is in the former tobacco states in the United States, where in some counties over 10% of the surface is covered by this one plant taken from China. kudzu. It's very sculptural, but from a natural point, very problematic. But there's also hopeful examples, like here in Chernobyl. We just started the research on this, and in the no-go zone around the former nuclear plant. What happens is actually that all the abandoned gardens, all the plant species that were in there started to blend into the natural landscape, creating a sort of new stable ecosystem which was much more diverse and rich and valuable than the historical situation. And that's for us inspiring to work on also nature in the city. And we're not extremists. We don't think we should create no-go zones everywhere. And we think, let's say, sort of comfortable use can be easily combined with this experience of nature. And we like this quote from Oscar Wilde saying, if nature would have been comfortable, mankind would have never invented architecture. So there's always a piece of architecture needed in this creating also natural experience. This balance between wilderness and comfort, we can also see that in the development of the beard of Brad Pitt over time. And it's kind of funny because this is 2006 is where we started The Office, so we could follow him throughout our career. And you see his appetite for the wilderness at a certain moment reaching a point where it's not really comfortable anymore. And then he goes back to the right balance. And that's, let's say, what we try to achieve directly in the projects we create. And it's always a construction. We are not after creating the perfect illusion. We think the construction can be a beautiful part of the landscape design. A first project I'm going to show is one of the first things we did is an installation which is all about natural experience. We first did it as a temporary 3-day installation and afterwards as a permanent version, which was focusing on the sound of nature, because we at a certain moment learned that for a full natural experience you need to not only see it but also hear it, and that's crucial. If you only see nature but hear cars, you appreciate it much less. And we felt a bit incompetent in actually manipulating that sound or designing with that sound. So we started to research that and got to know a lot. And about the acoustic quality of trees and the sound they make that can really vary from a very soft hiss to hard flapping or a dry rattling. And we wanted to make an installation with that. And the idea was simple: to take a piece of lovely Dutch forest, everything planted in rows, and shake the trees artificially so the leaves start to rustle, and you can actually hear it and enjoy it. Here's the permanent version with 24 trees we built in Belgium. And there you can see a bit how it works. We bolted shaking motors in all the trees, and they're all wired to a central computer with a dial-in module. And we asked the composer to create 10 compositions for those 24 trees over space and in time. And that's the ones you see here on the choosing panel. And you could actually dial a number and then choose one of the 10 patterns, and then the forest start to rustle. And people really appreciated it, and a lot of people said it really opened up their ears, and they started to really appreciate what they've always already were hearing but never really noticed. And another funny thing was that actually something we didn't realize is that also the fact that you were calling to a forest was perceived as a sort of funny thing, because it kind of made a new relation between the visitor and nature. Second project is a large master plan we're developing now already for 6-7 years, and it's the Singelpark in Leiden. It's a 6.5 kilometer long park around the the historic inner city of Leiden. And yeah, it's a sort of a strategic plan that's being executed over time. And one of the central things we're doing here is creating a continuous, gradually changing ecosystem of plants picked from all over the world. There is a Hortus botanicus in this park, and with them we're collecting plants and seeds from all over the world to sort of remix it into a sort of international new form of urban ecology to create a sort of continuous sense of diversity along the water lines. And these are some images where you can see how, let's say, the planting also creates a mood along this linear park. Let's say a more snappy version of that was a proposal we did for a competition. We didn't win in the end. It was for the headquarters of the United Nations in Bonn, where we proposed to make a garden called United Natures, where we would invite every country to bring a couple of plants they would expect to survive in the German climate, and to remix them all together into this sort of holistic, global form of ecology. But this interest got us very intrigued in the work of Piet Oudolf. There will be a documentary of his work, I think on Friday night. I would recommend to everyone to go and see it. He does beautiful things, he has incredible experience, and he, let's say we share the same interest, but he can do everything we can't. And so first I interviewed him, and then after that we started to collaborate on projects. We're now simultaneously working on four projects together. One of them now is in Stockholm, in the center of Stockholm. We're creating a public park where we're trying to really make a sort of a cloud of plants and flowers that you can really be absorbed by. So we're consciously designing the plants on knee height, hip height, and shoulder height. So you can really be surrounded by it, because let's say this nature is not only about looking, it's also about smelling and feeling. It's triggering all senses. Another project that got realized, actually very few projects of ours have been built till so far, because landscape architecture is immensely slow. But this one got built. It's a former estate turned into a park with a growing arts collection, and we were designing the extension of it. And why I'm showing this is also the relation it has to water, because this is the situation we have in the Netherlands all the time, where there's actually an abundance of water, and our biggest problem is how to get rid of it. Sorry. It comes from everywhere. Rain, rivers, sea, soil, and let's say until like 10, 20 years ago, the solution we had was to build higher dikes and bigger pumps to get it out as fast as possible. At a certain moment, we learned that this was not the right way, and we needed to absorb more, need to allow more of the dynamics of the natural system into our landscapes, and we started building buffers. And in this project also, let's say a large part of it, of the program we had to deal with, was actually creating water to absorb all the rainwater in case of heavy rainfall. And this was in two different situations. We created these two rooms. This is a sort of a maze, and at the same time a room divider for different spaces for events and arts exhibitions. As the first space, and the second space is over there, and it's much more wet, and that's the one we worked on together with Peter Oudolf. And this space can be flooded every now and then, so we worked with plants that are resistant to that. So it's a willow grove, which is actually cut and harvested every 3 years to use as biomass. And of course, water is also a great form of fun. So again, here we created a maze out of a water structure. But for a lot of plants, it actually doesn't really work. And so we created sort of refuge hills for the planting of Piet Oudolf. So, and that's what you can see over here. So mounds in the middle of that willow grove, actually fleeing from the water. And yeah, that's a complete different situation than we have over here. With the problems of drought, we're dealing also with in a project we're currently working on in Israel. It's in Beersheba. It's the 4th largest city of the country. And we were asked to create a park in a former quarry. This was a very collaborative project together with Topotech One Architecture, Scape from New York, and Moria Sekeli from Tel Aviv. And they basically asked us, like it's been in sort of a dead space for decades already. Could you please give us a lush park? And we thought that was kind of problematic because this city is really on the north tip of the Negev desert. And it's really dry out there. It's really difficult to create green spaces over here. If you go a bit south, you're getting into the serious desert where the only water you can find are these sort of very shallow muddles. And it also really has a sort of a Mad Max atmosphere over there. What's interesting is that in Israel they had a sort of similar problem as Cape Town is facing now. A sequence of dry years that caused, let's say, the aquifers in the country to completely be depleted. And they had to find a solution for that. They had a serious water crisis as well. And their solution was to build a sequence of a series of desalination plants along the coastline that was feeding a natural or a national water carrier that actually brings that desalinated water all across the country. So they kind of technically solved the problem. And what's interesting is that there is a sort of a deep desire in the Israeli people to create an oasis in the desert, to make the desert bloom. This comes from, let's say, culture, history, and religion. And it's an admirable ambition, but at the same time, you can see that they don't succeed everywhere. It creates sort of beautiful patterns looking from above, all fueled by this desalinated water. But if you look at it on eye level, you see it's a struggle. They also have a sort of preference for more Western type of public spaces, like this lawn that actually doesn't really work in the desert because it evaporates water, which creates humidity, which makes it completely unbearable to be there during daytime. And also, let's say you get to a point where, let's say, the funny flowers have less volume than the irrigation system is supporting those flowers. So we thought, can't we do something else? Can't we try to, let's say, make a park that's attractive, but doesn't depend on this sort of abundance of water? And we thought, well, it was a quarry. Let's try to reactivate the quarry to become an active thing, and let that be the main feature of this area. And as a productive space, it could also produce actually stones for the rest of the city, tiles to pave other important spaces of the city. And this can be done with the neighborhoods around it, can be part of sort of educational programs, and could also introduce a sort of new form of craftsmanship that got lost in this city, in which 98% of all the buildings is made out of concrete. As an ultimate goal, to actually, by excavating, sculpting the site that was there, to create interesting spaces to be in, and to function more or less as a park, as you can see here in the sections, and slowly revealing the texture and of the geology and creating different forms. And we thought of this as, let's say, really that in a normal park you have a gardener clipping hedges and maintaining the lawn. And here you would have a quarry worker that's with hammer and chisel working on the quarry, keeping it proper and improving it over time. And the stone actually creating shadow for the people. And we see this really as a process of something that takes a long time to develop and slowly grow over time. And actually, that process is part of the fun of this project. And actually, there's not one part, but there's 7 stages, and in each stage, a part gets revealed, a program gets added to this quarry. As you can see here, slowly digging down into the quarry, creating different spaces, and then in the end, getting to this sort of dream of the oasis in the desert. As you can see, it was a very dry proposal, very stony and dusty. And here, some images of first stage where we'll build a sort of information point and a shadow roof from which you can see the existing quarry, with a workshop where actually the excavated quarry is brought to and being processed by people as a form of theater. And from there, going down into the quarry, along steep walls, terraces, and ground stairs, and still, let's say, going around this piece that people are still working, and in the end, getting to the level where you can actually create water, and then reach at a certain point also a sort of truly cool and vegetated space. Well, so we presented this and it was welcomed, and we're now in the next stage. Next week I'm going there to present the final planning of the project. After this, which was concept stage, we got a big group of specialists and engineers actually helping us and making the problem of the project more realistic. So in terms of stone quality, not everywhere we could make these sort of steep walls. Still, the main ideas are in, like first phase now will be a sort of a cliff walk from which you can see the action in the quarry. And second stage will be sort of theater setting with the quarry in the background where people are still working. And this is where we're at. And yeah, the money is there. Everybody's ready to actually start to build it. And we hope, let's say, we'll achieve with this project that it introduces sort of inspiration also for people around there to maybe deal different with their own private backyard and creating a less water-consuming reality. Then we get to the project for Lutuli Plaza. It's a dome of plants, so and it's a collaboration with Design Indaba, which was really involved. Nomadic Resorts, architectural office based both in Rotterdam as in Cape Town, which comes in very handy. Leon Kluge, landscape designer. Cape Town has a fantastic biodiversity, one of the largest biodiversity from all over the world. And what's even more special is that it has its own floral region, its own set of plants that can only be found here. So we're very thrilled to work with that. We're also not the first landscape architects, Dutch landscape architects that are working here. Actually, we have quite a history, as you all know. Cape Town started with a garden. And there was a landscape architect, Hendrik Boom. Boom means tree. Nice name. In 1652, that was designing this garden for Cape Town and to grow food for the sailor people that had a stopover here on their way to the east. And from this, actually, Cape Town grew. It's a beautiful garden, it still is. At the same time, it was linked to a very merciless enterprise which did a lot of harm in the world and in South Africa. And therefore, we feel we're not starting with a clean slate, but we have to respond to that past. And we would like the project to not only be just a nice space, but also to be part of a sort of larger positive influence on the city. Ravi invited me to Cape Town to take a look at it personally, at the space. And that was in June last year, and there I actually got to know about the water crisis. Now everybody sees it, but then it was not so much all over the news. I heard about it, but not, let's say, how serious it was. And I got, let's say, my first shock was coming in the hotel, which was ironically called the Fountains Hotel, where they explained that you had to be a bit careful with the water use. Started reading into it and got also really shocked by this 100 liters per day. I thought that, wow, that's really drastic. Now we're at 50, so. But that led to the notion that we had to create something that's completely water neutral, that doesn't depend on this availability of water. And even though now it might be a sort of temporary situation, also, if you zoom out, there is also a more structural decline in the availability of water, and I think it's good to find new solutions and ideas on how to deal in a sustainable way with water. Back to Luthuli Plaza. It's a dead space, but it has great potential. It's part, what we think is very interesting, it's part of actually a series of spaces connecting the Grand Parade for pedestrians on +1 level all the way to the Artscape. And going over multiple hubs for trains, for metro, for minibus, for bus, from which you can reach all the city of Cape Town. And we think that has a huge potential. Whatever we do, the other way around, all the people of the city of Cape Town could reach it. And we think there's a big potential in this whole structure to become Cape Town's High Line, connecting Artscape to the Grand Parade. And Luthuli Plaza could be step 1 in that ambition. And we felt, when investigated in the possibilities here, that just a green carpet would not be enough. Let's say it's also one of the big problems is there is no program, no life. It's not fed by different programs along the edges. So we thought, can't we make a landscape that functions as an envelope for new programmed activities? So we came up with this idea of a sort of a dome structure of plants in which things could be organized. This dome itself, we thought, could be the most beautifully planted thing with the best of the endemic species the Cape has to offer. With these bromelias, for instance, and the ericas, that all together could form a sort of sphere-shaped botanical garden around this space in the middle, with a collection of endemic species. A large part of it could be made of a speckboom tree, which we found peculiarly interesting because it has so interesting characteristics. It's edible, it's fire-resistant, drought-tolerant, it's indigenous, and it can actually bind up to 1 hectare can bind up to 4,200 kilos of carbon each year. So it also will create sort of clean air inside this pavilion. All these plants will be planted on a sort of system of hydroponics, which is gaining terrain all over the world because it's the most effective and sustainable way of growing crops. Water use is very efficient, hardly any evaporation. And this will be the backbone of this of the plants. Originally thought this could be fed by reused water of the civic center, which seemed smart. But then this new water crisis came in the news, and they were talking about day zero, where there would actually be no water at all. And we thought, then you also have no water to reuse, so that's a problem. And we came up with the next idea to actually reuse piss from the civil servants from the civic center will be filtered and used here to create this beautiful dome. And we approached a group of scientists from Belgium, the University of Ghent, and they actually have the technique, are developing the technique to make this happen. So they will be involved. Inside that dome, there will be a salon and a stage for sort of small events. Could be lectures, expositions, cinema, concerts, small concerts. And on a daily basis, just lunches or workspaces could be organized there. And it could be really a sort of a magnet in this larger area. And Design Indaba is also prepared to help program this space throughout the whole year, next to this sort of big event we have here right now. The construction is made of bamboo, sustainable material, very fast growing, grows also in South Africa. And it's very interesting, so it can be locally produced. And there we have another challenge to meet, and that's actually the wind. This is a very funny video I can't show right now, but you should look it up on YouTube, where actually the racing tour is trying to get past the civic center, but they just fail all the time and are blown back by the wind. So the severe wind is also really a challenge for this dome. And in the first models we tested with 100 kilometers an hour, you saw also the deformation of that dome, which looked really scary. And so in the end, we came up with a sort of a double dome. So it has a double layer that will be strong enough to resist these winds. Around it, there will be a public garden. The dome will be 15 meters tall and 20 meters wide. And hopefully next year, we'll be able to organize a side gig in this dome. Thank you very much.